Lepping positioned the knife on the stone and asked them to listen carefully to the sound of the forging. Thus began the meticulous process of polishing and sharpening, repeatedly passing the blade over the stone he had brought with him. Each stroke produced a sharp and clean sound, a metallic echo that resonated in the air. With each precise movement, a faint glow emerged between the two objects, as if the energy of the steel had come to life. After a period of uninterrupted work, the hero stopped and calmly announced that he had finished. Heimenderger, his gaze fixed on the scene, called his son to witness the forging. However, Brian squinted and shook his head, saying he couldn't see because the glow was too intense. The Dwarf King watched intently, feeling a shiver run down his spine. In his nearly 700 years of forging experience, he had never witnessed anything like this. Before his eyes, a god descended and seemed to enter the knife that Lepping had just created, as if the essence of that powerful being had been trapped in the blade. Alpha, perplexed by what he had just witnessed, urged his superior, Wang Kai, to take a closer look. He added that it was exactly as he had described. At that moment, a disturbing thought crossed his mind. The weapon forged by the hero had the power to attract gods from different worlds and allow a part of their consciousness to inhabit it. After that astonishing revelation, Lepping walked toward Heimenderger with firm steps, holding the knife with both hands. His voice, serene yet determined, broke the silence. He asked the Great Lord if he could help analyze his work. The king, still with a slight tremor in his hands after witnessing the hero's miraculous forging, nodded slowly. With a deep sigh, he agreed to examine the knife. Taking it and using the evaluation ability, he magnified the image 10,000 times. He reflected that, even at maximum magnification, the edge remained perfectly smooth. He wondered how that could be possible, and even considered that his glasses might be broken. However, he decided not to dwell on it. What really mattered to him now was identifying whether the knife had any special effects. It was then that he noticed the terrifying special effect of the table knife, forged by Lepping's hands, instant death. Seeing this information, Heimenderger was startled. A chill ran down his spine as he cried out in fear, questioning what was happening. How could a simple table knife have such a devastating special effect? He thought that this could no longer be classified as an S-class weapon, not even as a super S-class. No, this was something far beyond that. What lay before his eyes was a divine artifact, a true and pure divine artifact. After analyzing the situation, he turned around with a look of disbelief on his face. At that moment, an idea took hold of his mind. The key to achieving such an effect must lie in the sharpening stone used in the forging. With that certainty in mind, he asked for permission to examine it up close. He slowly approached the stone and, observing it closely, assumed it must be a material more advanced than celestial ore. However, when he touched it, the stone shattered into pieces. Heimenderger froze in shock, his mind unable to process what had just happened. Could it really have been just an ordinary sharpening stone? The great man fell to his knees, feeling his understanding of the world shaken. A deep sense of helplessness overcame him, and unable to resist, he began to cry. Lepping, a little concerned by his reaction, approached and asked what was wrong. Heimenderger, his voice trembling, responded with two questions. The first, how did he manage to forge something like that? And the second, could he share his forging method? Upon hearing that, Lepping sighed and simply asked the Dwarf King not to joke with him. At the same time, he thought that Heimenderger was being ironic. After all, the Dwarf King had described his knife as something like that, as if it were just any ordinary object. He couldn't help but feel insecure. His forging was entirely ordinary, and in his mind, it could never compare to that of the dwarves. That's why he answered sincerely. He said that, in reality, he had never thought too much about forging. And if he had to say anything about his own work, it would be that his understanding of the subject was quite basic. Moreover, he also reflected that the Dwarf King was probably just being polite because Elizabeth was present, although in his opinion, his reaction was a bit too exaggerated. Finally, Lepping simply said that when forging, the only thing he did was use his heart. That left Heimenderger confused, but he quickly said that now he understood, looking at Lepping as if he were the god of forging. The queen let out a soft laugh and commented that it was better to teach someone how to fish than to simply give them a fish, pointing out that Lepping had used a simple principle to reveal the essence of the power of rules. After that, in another place, a train awaited them. Heimenderger informed everyone that the train would transport the ore directly to the kingdom of Aristotle and that the demon queen would take on the role of transport officer. Thanks to this, they would have permission to enter the capital without any issues. Then, he added that the train journey would take approximately 2 days and, with some curiosity, asked the hero why he and his group didn't simply teleport. Lepping calmly replied that time was not an issue, but rather, the most important thing was for the kingdom of Aristotle to feel his goodwill. Gigi, with a thoughtful expression, wondered aloud if that goodwill would be well received. He couldn't help but think that if the kingdom of Aristotle rejected them, they might have to force their way in. Elizabeth, on the other hand, had a completely different concern and asked what they would have for dinner that night, considering the journey would take 2 days. Before anyone could answer, Brian intervened with a serious warning. He explained that bandits had recently appeared along the route and that several cargo trains had been raided, so he urged the hero and the queen to be careful. However, both completely ignored him, something he himself noticed with a hint of resignation. Nevertheless, Lepping responded to Elizabeth with a smile, saying that he had brought ingredients and only needed her to say what she wanted to eat, as he would prepare it. The queen, without much thought, stated that whatever he made would be enough and that she wouldn't complain. At that moment, Heimenderger changed the subject and asked the hero if the precious object he had forged was truly a gift for the Dwarf Kingdom. Lepping, without giving it much importance, replied that there was no need for such formality and simply asked them to take it. The Dwarf King, deeply moved, sincerely thanks him and declares that, thanks to that blade, dwarven forging will reach a new level. Immediately afterward, he kneels and asks his son to do the same. Without hesitation, the young man obeys, and both express their gratitude to Lepping, assuring him that, for their dwarven kingdom, he will forever be recognized as a god of forging. Lepping, feeling a bit embarrassed by the exaggerated display of respect, quickly asks them to stand up and tells them they don't need to do that. Suddenly, a voice interrupts them. Someone calls out to both of them, warning that the train is about to depart. It's Alpha, who is already aboard the locomotive. Elizabeth, wasting no more time, says it's best to leave now, as the sooner they complete their mission, the faster they can return home. And with that, we've reached the end of this week's chapter. If you made it all the way to the end, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this chapter in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe so our community can keep growing and we can reach more fans like you. See you in the next video. In the meantime, if you're from the near future, I'll leave you the next chapter and a comic you're sure to enjoy. Thank you for being part of this adventure.